there's a lot of interesting discussion, and I'm not sure if it might be in the stuff in the background about story frames.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you know, the Arabian Nights, I guess the idea is the talking cure, where by telling stories to somebody you kind of enact life for them and they kind of form a set of relationships to it and begin to see things in perspective, you know, because of course the king is in this insane state where he executes the woman he sleeps with every morning, and he's cured of this by hearing this long succession of stories about adultery, fidelity, murder, war, everything you can imagine, all rolled into this very, very complex set of narratives. But and there the story is only significant in a sense because of its frame, because it has a significance within the frame, and yet the story has its own existence and its own meanings and so on. And so I guess
Is this something that distinguishes perhaps sort of folk mythology from literature, is that the literature always occurs in a kind of frame?
Yeah, and we also expect, in terms of what we call literature, the story to be analysable, so the details will bear fruit. Whereas if you look at folk tales and things, and even like Arabian Nights stories, you find repetitions which are significant because they're repetitions, but not necessarily intrinsically significant. So you'll find three characters, all of whom have been blinded in one eye, and they all tell stories about how they got blinded, but it isn't significant that there's three of them, except that three is a good number, or seven's a good number, or you get recurring patterns. It's a way of patterning narratives so that the hearers feel there's a pattern, but they don't need to go further because they're simply hearing it. They can't access it again at the end and sort of say, right, now I'm going to sit down and really work out the significance of that story.
There's the central story is a story that really takes a lot of risks with humour and with terms of the content, and then, but of course it's the most framed story because it's between the other two. It's framed by the other two. It's called Moons of Mars, and you certainly break a few rules in that story.
I guess I do feel you got to rub people's noses and things for them to notice them. And I mean, if I were a subtler writer, perhaps I might convey more by indirection. But I'm just interested in things like very, very pre-programmed narrative types, like a detective story, thriller, pornography, genre, fictions, various kinds. And I thought, well, my basic genre fiction, I guess, is Chandler-esque.
The main character here is called Marlowe.
Yeah, he's spelled Marlowe, basically.
45 years old. Where did the names come from? Well, what about Phil?
Well, I guess Phil, it's just sort of
P-H-I-L.
She's actually
Philippa Marlowe.
Philippa, yeah. And Luce, I kind of like the name Lucy, but also I've been reading a novel by Georges Bataille, and called Bleu du Ciel, or Blue of Noon, but one of the female characters was called Dirty, and this just struck me as the most brilliant name for a character. Again, there's no subtlety when you called your character Dirty. And I thought, well, I'll call my character Loose. And of course, the characters joke about their names and so on as they go along, but it's, I guess, supposed to emphasise that they are characters, but also make perhaps the reader see the degree to which it's possible to empathise or, feel through the eyes of characters, no matter how paper thin they actually are. And the paper thin begins to dissolve and the reality of your imagination of the character begins to come through, as people are thinking, why didn't you make them a bit more lifelike? Or I was really beginning to quite like so-and-so, as if they were real people. I mean, they become, I think, real people, both in the reader and the writer's eyes, to a surprising and almost disconcerting extent.